Hi, I'm Pablo Avila, and this is my experience at UWM with my internship. So my role at UWM was in software development. I was an intern there, and United Wholesale Mortgage stands for, or that's what UWM means. My responsibilities were in app development. So what app specifically would be Brand 360. So Brand 360 is essentially a app that helps loan officers contact their borrowers in a more efficient manner, such that like it would automate emails and texts saying like, "Hey, I noticed a new update on your loan" or something like that. Basically helps loan officers stay in touch. So that was the work that I did in United Wholesale Mortgage. And I only applied for one credit for this course. Some of my achievements at UWM consist of completing my first story. So what I mean by story is like essentially my first task or my first code change in the main code base at UWM. And the process is very lengthy, and it tests a lot of your code to make sure it's up to date, it's very safe and secure, and it works well with other services. And so my first story, it was a relatively simple one for as expected for an internship, but understanding the pipeline of a developer is very important, and I feel like I learned a lot from that. So what this means, dev, int, and prod, essentially means the developer environment, or where I make my code changes locally, that's developer. And then when I try to push it up and higher into the pipeline, then it goes to integration. In there, people besides me, they test my code, make sure it works well with everything else. And then if they decide it works well, then they're going to push it to production, which is essentially what the clients see, like what the clients experience and what they can see. So that's where everything needs to be in tip-top shape. And thankfully, my first story was pushed to production. It was a very simple renaming of a column in SQL. So that was a pretty simple query, but the whole progress had its own journey, which I'll talk about later. Another achievement I accomplished was receiving 6 kudos within 6 weeks. So kudos are a little fun, unique thing about UWM. Essentially, they're a way to shout out or acknowledge a teammate who put in exceptional work and essentially praise them online. Essentially, UWM has their own little UWM Facebook. It's not actually called Facebook, but it's called UZone, and it's kind of like their own social media. And there you can see people receiving and giving kudos. So each kudos comes from a good place. So it made me happy that I received a good amount of kudos within such a short time. I also made significant progress with PandaSort in regards to generating synthetic data. So PandaSort is a team project that was assigned to me and a couple other interns. And essentially, we are a mortgage company. And so our app, Brand 360, has a feature that allows loan officers to submit loan information regarding their clients. So essentially saying, hey, this is the loan, this is their loan ID, this is the client's birthday, first name, last name, date of birth, everything you need for a loan essentially. But the problem is that sometimes the form that they submit isn't properly matched or mapped to the right data points in our system. So then it'll require the loan officer or the broker to go and manually map, like, okay, this is their first name, this is their last name, etc., which can be very tedious. So PandaSort is essentially the solution to that problem, where they have to so PandaSort is essentially an AI model that will automatically detect, okay, this is their first name, this will go into here. This is their address, this will go into here. Even if the form that the loan officer submitted is messed up or has a little tweaks. When I say has a little tweaks, I mean, like, let's say instead of saying first name Pablo, their form might say capital F name Pablo, right? So normally a traditional system wouldn't be able to really detect that slight change, but an AI model would. So that was the goal of PandaSort, and right now we're still working on it. I still have about like 5 or 6 more weeks of this internship, but I was able to make some pretty good breakthroughs in regards to my task, which was generating synthetic data. So when you're developing an AI model, you require a lot of information. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough production information. So we didn't have enough real information, or canonical data as it's called. And so what we needed to do was generate synthetic data, which is fake data, but still realistic enough for training purposes. So we could generate like fake emails, fake phone numbers, and that would still be good enough for the AI model to detect, okay, that's a phone number, okay, that's an address, or that's a zip code. So that is what generating synthetic data is. And I was actually able to complete a script in Python that did that with our real production data. So that was a pretty big achievement there, and we're still working on it now, but I feel pretty confident with how it's going. As for my applied technical and soft skills, I would say Python is a big technical skill that I had to use during and throughout my internship. Basically, PandaSort is essentially an AI model, and it's very common for AI models to be built off Python. So that was the entirety of my synthetic data generation script. That was written entirely in Python. So there I had to make sure my Python skills were up to date. I was a little rusty at first, but I got back into the swing of things, and I was glad it all worked out. SQL is another language. Thankfully, I just took a class on SQL last semester, so the data the experience was still fresh in my mind. And the way I used SQL was to retrieve data from the database to essentially create that synthetic data. I also used it for my first story. Like I mentioned before, it was a renaming of a column in a database. So that query was written in SQL. And then also I had to use a little bit of C# for my first story. C# was actually a language that I had no experience in. Thankfully, it's very similar to my main language, Java. So that was pretty good to hear. And so while I didn't do a lot of coding in C#, essentially like 80% of the code base at UWM is written in C#. So understanding how my changes affected the rest of the system was very important. So I would say C# is another skill I developed throughout my time here. As for my soft skills, I would say communication is probably the number one most important part. I feel like as an intern, it's very easy to sit back and take in a lot of stuff, but like also not be proactive about the work you receive. So I believe I've asked a lot of questions regarding my work and regarding my future work, and I've tried my best to stay in the loop. And I think one example is when I was faced with a tough problem or with a tough problem in regards to my first story. Essentially, At first, I was a bit lost, and I felt like at first I thought it was due to my lack of knowledge or experience. And so I was a bit hesitant at first to ask for help. But turns out, after I asked for help, they were like, oh, yeah, this is not your fault at all. Turns out you just didn't have the right permissions. So if I had stuck to myself and just tried to tackle it, I would have gotten nowhere. So thankfully, being proactive and not waiting until it becomes a problem is something very important that I definitely learned and developed throughout my time here at UWM. Another skill I think I'm practicing is time management. So the way an internship works at UWM is you basically balance stories with your team project. So like I said before, Pandasaur is usually worked on mainly by a bunch of other interns, including me. And so I had to balance that work with my other team's work. And so making sure that I have enough time for both is very important throughout the day. Not to mention, I think another skill I've demonstrated throughout my time is professionalism. So mainly maintaining a positive work environment. I think one of my favorite examples is one of our teammates on Pandasort. He was doing an exceptional job. Honestly, he was like the figure of what a good, hardworking person at our team should be. Whenever he wasn't working, he was always doing documentation or other miscellaneous tasks that would normally be forgotten. So it was really impressive that he would remember that. And so at one of our meetings, at the end of the meeting, I wanted to shout him out in front of our whole team, essentially encouraging him and praising him for the hard work he's put in. And I want to make sure that his hard work isn't unseen. And so I feel like that little action helped create a positive work environment. And hopefully I made him feel better about the work he's putting in. As for the relevant courses that this course or this internship could be applied to, are all courses I plan on taking in the future with my next year. CSI 4350, Programming Languages. This essentially goes over how programming languages are compiled and interpreted. So my experience with Python, SQL, and C# will all come in handy there. And then artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're kind of similar, but this will be very useful. Or I feel like my work in Pandasort in terms of building the AI model will be super useful in these courses that I'll be taking in the fall and the winter. One of the biggest challenges I faced was the development of my first story. So like I said before, it was a pretty simple story. It was a renaming of a column in the database. And so what happened was when I applied those changes locally, it also altered another file that wasn't supposed to be changed. And so that was causing a lot of issues. And so at first I was a bit confused. So I asked my mentor, and he essentially told me to fix the changes that it caused by essentially adding more changes. And unfortunately, my mentor was a very busy person. So what he would do is he would basically come in, look at the problem, and be like, okay, here are the set of steps that you need to achieve or you need to accomplish. Like step 1, 2, 3, I would write these all down. And then he would leave and go to his meeting, and he would be back who knows when, whether it be like 1 or 2 hours. And so I was stuck with those steps because I would essentially be, all right, step 1, let's do this. And I would already run into another bug or another error, and I would be completely lost. And I felt stuck because I felt like I had the direction, right? I already had the game plan. I just had to execute it. So I felt confined to myself, and I felt like I shouldn't ask for help because it's my fault that it's not working. And I know what I need to do. I just need to do it. So that's what kept me stuck to myself and stopped me from asking questions to other teammates. because in reality, they're all there for me and they all want to help me out. But they're not going to help me if I don't ask. So that was what kept me so hesitant in asking for help. And so how I overcame this, it sounds super simple in hindsight, but I asked help from different developers and they were able to help me look at the big picture. So the error I mentioned before occurred from an unintentional change in a separate file. And so rather than trying to fix that file, all I had to do, or for my story, was just revert those changes. And then just like that, everything else started working fine. And so I feel like that's another lesson I can learn as a software developer, is that it's so easy to hyperfixate on the problem. So for me, it was like trying to understand, why did this change happen? How can I fix it? What can I do better? But instead, I should have just taken a step back. I'm going to be like, okay, maybe I should just undo that change and then let's see if it works. And that change actually did end up working out. So that was a big relief on my end. And so it's a bit weird that I overcame this challenge, not with the most like strict set of actionable steps, but I believe I achieved it through more of a shift in mentality in terms of being more comfortable with asking for help and being able to identify the bigger picture when I'm assigned tasks. So some new knowledge that I've learned at UWM is actually about the mortgage industry, which is funnily enough, like I came here at UWM to learn more about software development, but I actually ended up learning a lot about the difference between retail versus wholesale mortgages, as that was a large part of our training. So essentially, retail mortgages are essentially when the bank, such as Wells Fargo, Chase, they provide their clients with a limited amount of options in terms of mortgages, and basically saying, hey, you can only pick from these select few. And these usually result in higher costs for the customer. But what what wholesale mortgages are is where a loan officer or a broker goes around and scouts out multiple different options from different lenders in order to find the best mortgage for their clients. So this all in all results in a better deal for their clients. So when I want to own a house, I will definitely go to wholesale mortgages. So that was something funny I learned, which will help me with my future career when I want to own a house. Another insight that I learned in the software development field specifically is the implementation of AI. And the way with AI being such a new development, it's interesting to see how it was applied in the professional field. And the way it's used right now is it's still 50-50 in terms of some developers use it to write code, while some developers prefer to write it by hand. Right now, our company's pretty apathetic, or they're not pushing one way or another. But I do see some developers use AI to write code all by itself, and then they just proofread it and make sure it's like the best solution. And so I feel like that's a decision I'll have to make in the future, as I become a software developer, how I want to use it and how much I want to rely on it. So that's an important decision that will impact me as a software developer. My first goal with this internship was essentially to boost my confidence in regards to applying the knowledge that I've learned in school. So my biggest problem is that I know how to program, right? I can do the assignments in my courses, but I was a bit worried that it wouldn't translate that well into the real workforce. And so this internship would help me figure out that goal. And I feel like it's definitely useful. All the fundamentals I've learned in school transferred over pretty smoothly, and there are some gaps that can't be completed in school. So essentially, the development pipeline, that was something that is unique to every company, so it can't be taught in school. So learning how your code changes go from your local machine all the way to production is something that I was very excited to learn, and it was very interesting actually. And so that's one example of how I achieved my goal of learning how the technical knowledge is applied in a real work environment. For my second goal, it's pretty more straightforward. I wanted to gain experience working with a team. This is something you cannot learn in school, and so this is something I really wanted to strike hard on, as I feel like my ability to work with a team and my communication skills are relatively strong. So I feel like I wanted to combine my skills with this goal. And so far, I think I'm doing a pretty good job. I mentioned before that I'm working on two teams, right? So my Panda Sort team and then my other main team. And so working with two teams at the same time has definitely challenged me to try my best in both and be communicative about my responsibilities and what other people have to do. And so that is one way I believe I'm working on achieving my goal of gaining more experience working with a professional team. As for goal 3, I want to determine if this is the right role for me within the technology world. With a computer science degree, you can go through a lot of different job paths. So I was a bit worried that I might have chosen the wrong one within the computer science field, but I feel as though it is the right fit for me, because what I wanted to avoid was a super stressful job that required a lot of pivoting and essentially just a very stressful job. But I think that this job is just the right amount of, I don't want to say relaxing, but not stressful. And another thing that I like about it is that it allows you to be creative with your solutions and allows you to take pride in your work, right? So it's not so cut and dry as like, this is the right way to do it and you have to do it this way. You can have a little creativity with your solutions in your code. And I feel like that allows you to feel more fulfilled with your job. And so that's what I like about UWM, or actually just software development in general. So I feel like this has definitely boosted my confidence that this is the right fit for me. This internship has several impacts in terms of my short-term and long-term goals. In terms of my short-term, it will definitely increase my odds of getting a full-time position after graduation. I feel like having an internship experience on your resume is a really good indicator to recruiters, basically showing them that you already have experience in the field and that you're already a suitable candidate for them. So I feel like that will help me receive a job after graduation, which is one of my short-term goals. I guess more bluntly, another goal that helps me achieve is paying for next year's tuition. Thankfully, this internship was a paid one, and so I'll be using a large portion of that money to help pay for my tuition. So I'll be able to graduate on time. A long-term goal that this internship is helping me achieve is achieving receiving experience working with teams. I feel like this knowledge and this experience will stick with me for the rest of my life. It's not something you can really ignore, no matter which career I choose to go in, really. But I feel like that will stick with me and help me be a better software developer in my future. I feel like another thing it has helped me is achieve confidence in my career path. I feel like throughout a large majority in my career and education, there was always that voice in the back of my head doubting whether this was the right pick or the right career path. And I feel like this internship has definitely helped me satisfied those worries. So I feel like that's another thing that's helped me throughout my long-term goal of my confidence in my career path. I feel like the two biggest takeaways I have for this internship speak more to me as a person than my as a software developer. So I feel like the biggest lesson that I learned was don't try and tackle a problem all by yourself, even if you feel like you have what it takes to complete it. This comes from the biggest challenge that I faced that I mentioned before. So that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned. And I guess another thing that I also realized is that I picked the right path in terms of software development as a future career. I'm feeling pretty confident now, and I feel like that was something that I was very, very worried about for many years. So I'm glad that this internship was able to clear this out. And ultimately, I just want to thank UWM for giving me the opportunity to code for them, and I look forward to potentially working with them in the future at a full-time offer.